Hey guys, tonight we slip back to a world before alarm clocks, before iPhones buzzing on your nightstand, before even coffee was anywhere near your reach. You're in a medieval castle, and you're not the lord or lady. No way you're closer to the floor-scrubbing, hay-hauling crew. That's right. Tonight we're going to wander through the quiet, unglamorous, yet absolutely vital routines that kept a castle alive every single morning. And spoiler, you probably wouldn't survive the first week of it, because the days begin before the sun even thinks about showing up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it there as you hit play. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice in the castle is the dark. It's not the soft dim of your bedroom with a nightlight or glow from the street outside. It's heavy, pressing dark, the kind where your eyes struggle and fail. Servants stir long before dawn, padding through hallways with only tallow candles or little oil lamps, which sputter like they're as tired as the people carrying them. You feel the chill creep in right away. These walls are thick, but insulation isn't really a thing yet. Stone is stone, and stone remembers the cold. You hear muffled coughs and boots scuffing against worn floors as the castle's heartbeat begins. People rise from pallets stuffed with straw or wool scraps, and their first movements are slow, like reluctant machines. Someone groans in Latin prayers half-mumbled. Another tugs at a tunic that smells faintly of smoke and yesterday's stew. Hygiene is a matter of wiping the sleep from your eyes and hoping lice haven't made a new home in your hair. It's not glamorous, but hey, if your TikTok morning routine involves expensive face serums, maybe be grateful you're not here. The work begins invisibly. Servants slip into kitchens, grooms head for the stables, and guards take the last steps of their night watch, stamping cold feet and wishing for the dawn. You tag along in the corridors where rushes on the floor crunch underfoot, hiding last night's spills but releasing that funky, grassy smell that comes free with the medieval housekeeping package. Now, you might think castles wake with a dramatic trumpet blast or a rooster crowing theatrically on a tower. Reality check. Most mornings are silent except for yawns, whispers, and the hiss of breath in icy air. The drama is inside the bodies of people forcing themselves upright. Historians still argue whether households ran on the canonical hours, strictly those church-dictated times, like Athens before dawn, or if practical work trumped religious bells. Chances are it was a messy blend, depending on the size of the castle and how fussy the lord was about piety. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some households, servants apparently tried to predict the lord's waking mood based on omens, like how the fire smoked or whether the hounds stirred early. It's like checking your boss's horoscope before Monday's meeting. Did the dog bark at shadows? Better brace yourself, his lordship might be cranky. Meanwhile, outside the walls, the wider world is also shifting. Peasants in the fields move with first light, but you don't see them yet. Right now, your world is the castle interior, the heartbeat before the full day's rhythm begins. Someone clatters down a stairway carrying firewood. And you nearly trip over a boy half asleep trying to tie his hose, mumbling about how cold the floor is. Another servant mutters about running out of clean rushes for the hall, which basically means the whole place will smell like wet dog until someone brings in new reeds. What you don't see but absolutely senses the hierarchy embedded in every sleepy step. Even at dawn, everyone knows their place. The kitchen staff don't dare wander into the stables. The grooms won't be caught dead arranging linens. There's a silent map of duties, and stepping off it is social quicksand. You're a floating observer, lucky enough not to be yelled at for carrying the wrong pail. Candles burn low as the first faint gray light brushes through arrow slits. You catch a glimpse of your breath fogging in the air. This moment, before the fires are relit, is when the castle is most vulnerable. Cold, groggy, and relying entirely on muscle memory. Think of it as the medieval version of your half-awake stumble to the kitchen for cereal. Except, instead of cereal, they're heading for cauldrons, buckets, straw piles, and very possibly a shovel for muck. And here's a mainstream fact to tuck in your pocket. Most castles weren't constantly bustling with huge garrisons like in movies. On ordinary days, they held a few dozen to maybe 100 residents, including servants, guards, and family. That means this morning's shuffle is more intimate than Epic hits co-workers bumping into each other before the shift starts. Someone sneezes violently, scattering droplets into the dark. Germ theory won't be a thing for centuries, so the only reaction is a muttered blessing and a hope it's not plague. The irony. That sneeze has more potential to wreck the castle than any battering ram. But don't think about that chore sleepy brain doesn't want stress right now. The quiet is fragile. Somewhere above, a rooster finally does its thing, but it's muffled by stone. Below, a maid whispers to another, debating whether they'll have enough bread to stretch for everyone's breakfast. Down in the cellar, barrels of ale wait to be tapped. Because yes, ale at dawn was normal, and water was far too suspicious for daily drinking. A shadow flickers across your vision as the night watch shifts guard. You feel their weariness. They've been staring into darkness for hours, ears tuned to the slightest rustle beyond the walls. You catch a muttered complaint about wolves, though historians still argue whether wolves really roamed so close to castles, or if guards used them as excuses for every mysterious sound. Either way, you shiver just picturing yellow eyes in the woods. The sky is still ink dark, but hints of pale blue begin to seep into it. Inside, servants work faster now, as though daylight itself is the boss checking in early. Fires must be coaxed from embers, and that means frantic blowing, careful piling of twigs, and occasionally swearing when smoke backfires into someone's face. You cough along with them, because medieval smoke doesn't politely waft upward, swirls around, stings your eyes, and coats your throat. And in this dim chaos, you realize something? This castle, for all its stone grandeur, is just a glorified household on steroids. It runs on chores, on human breath, on people half awake, dragging themselves to duty. Without this hidden workforce, the Lord could strut all he wanted, but nothing would be ready when he decided to wake. You shuffle through the corridors again, past the flicker of oil lamps. A maid balances a basket of linens, muttering about mice chewing holes through cloth. Someone else slams a door too loudly, and a scolding whisper follows because if you wake the wrong person early, your entire day could become very unpleasant. You remember that reality check? You wouldn't last because you'd probably sneeze too loud and get reassigned to latrine duty. As the final minutes of darkness cling on, there's a strange peace in the castle. Everyone is moving, but hushed, aware of the sleeping nobility above. It's like being backstage before a play. Every role practiced, every prop in motion, yet the curtain hasn't risen. Soon the kitchens will roar, the stables will kick, and the chapel bells will echo. For now, you're in the fragile seam between night and day, the quiet work behind the castle's morning routine. Starting with those first, sleepy, shivering, essential steps, you drift toward the kitchens, following the trail of warmth and smoke. It's still early, so early, you could probably count the stars still clinging to the sky, but in here, the day has already begun with a roar. Well, more of a cough and sputter at first. The fire's been coaxed from last night's embers, and now it catches in a whoosh, sending a sudden heat wave across your cheeks. Someone mutters about singed eyebrows. That's the medieval version of a workplace hazard no OSHA inspector is ever coming. The kitchen is the castle's engine room, its beating stomach. You see cooks moving like grumpy ghosts, sleeves rolled, eyes half shut, hair tied back or tucked under wool caps. Their hands are already blackened with soot. A boy struggles to drag in another log, grunting like it's an Olympic event, and you're tempted to cheer him on. But no one claps here, it's just expected labor. Bread is the first concern. Yesterday's dough, left to rise under cloths near the hearth, is uncovered and slapped into shape. You hear the dull thud as loaves are smacked onto wooden boards. The smell is immediately sour, warm, and honestly, it makes you forgive every drafty hallway you passed through earlier. Even if you'd sworn you weren't hungry, the aroma grabs your stomach by the collar. But breakfast isn't a kingly feast, not yet. It's humble, practical. Porridge made from oats or barley is stirred in cauldrons, the thick glop bubbling like a mud pit. A cook stirs it with what looks like a staff, muttering under his breath about the lumps. Someone else hacks at salted fish, the knife scraping bone, while another servant pours last night's ale into jugs. Yes, ale for breakfast. Forget orange juice. In the Middle Ages, ale is safer than water, though it's usually weak and low alcohol in the mornings. You sip it in your imagination, and it tastes like soggy bread water. Don't expect craft brewery quality. One mainstream fact for you. In many castles, the kitchen wasn't even inside the main keep. Fires were dangerous, so separate kitchen buildings were common, linked by passages or just a brisk walk across the yard. You imagine hauling trays of steaming food through sleet or mud, and suddenly have new respect for medieval waitstaff. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some kitchens apparently used bread itself as a cooking surface. Big flat loaves called trenchers doubled as plates, soaking up meat juices and sauces. Breakfast isn't fancy enough for trenchers, but you spot them stacked in preparation for later meals, like edible dishware just waiting to go soggy. Eco-friendly before it was cool. You hover near the porridge cauldron, feeling the heat on your face. The cook flicks a wooden spoon at a boy sneaking a taste, catching him on the knuckles with a sharp smack. Discipline here is instant and physical. No HR complaint forms necessary. The boy winces, rubs his hand, and keeps stirring. That's the rhythm. Complain, get whacked, keep working. Above the din of chopping and stirring, voices rise in a mix of gossip and scheduling. Who's late again? Who spilled flour yesterday and got a rat scolding from the steward? Who might get dismissed if they keep burning the bread? The medieval kitchen is both cafeteria and rumor mill. You chuckle quietly, realizing not much has changed, swap the tunics for hairnets, and you're in any modern back kitchen. The smoke thickens, curling up through holes in the ceiling meant to vent it. You cough a little, eyes stinging, and realize this is just how it is, day after day. The castle might be stone, but every meal is flavored with wood smoke, whether you want it or not. Historians still argue whether constant smoke helped preserve food or just ruined lungs faster. But either way, you'd smell like a campfire for life. A loud thump draws your attention. A girl your age drops a sack of onions so hard the dust puffs like a bomb. People groan because now everyone's eyes water. One cook starts singing badly, a tune about saints protecting him from crying over onions. And soon the whole room smells like tears and earthy sweetness. Jokes are cracksome, surprisingly sharp, some groan-worthy, and the mood lifts. Even here, humor's a survival tactic. A steward arrives, his steps crisp, his eyes scanning the chaos like a hawk. He inspects loaves, dips a finger into porridge, and sniffs suspiciously at the fish. Servants stiffen, shoulders tight. This is quality control medieval style. If the food displeases the steward, everyone might suffer a lecture, or worse, reduced rations. You hold your breath as he tastes. He chews, he swallows. He nods once, curtly, and moves on. Exhale. Now, you might assume the lord and lady eat like royalty at every meal. Surprise! Breakfast for nobles was often pretty modest. Bread, maybe cheese, a bit of cold meat, if available. Big feasts were reserved for midday or evening. So while you picture gleaming tables, reality is more like your sad leftover sandwich, just fancier bread and better ale. The kitchen staff hustle on, sliding loaves into the oven, stirring pots until their arms ache. Someone sings again, louder this time, and a spoon beats time against a pan. The rhythm of labor becomes its own music. And in that moment, you realize this is not just routine, it's survival. Without this exact ballet of chopping, stirring, and hauling, the castle would grind to a halt. Here's your reality check. You wouldn't last either. You'd burn your hand on the fire, spill half a jug of ale, sneeze in the bread dough, and get reassigned to muck duty before sunrise. And remember, muck duty isn't just horses. We'll get to that. Your eyes wander to a basket of eggs. Rare treats, not guaranteed, every day. A boy cracks one badly, yolk dribbling into the ashes. The cook roars, the boy cringes, and you quietly think, at least you're not him. The light outside is strengthening now, seeping through high slits into the smoky room. Servants rush faster, because the upstairs household will stir soon, and if food isn't ready. Let's just say hangry nobility isn't a phrase you want to experience firsthand. The smell is intoxicating: bread crisping, onions frying, herbs crushed under mortar and pestle. Your stomach growls, but you know you'd be at the bottom of the eating hierarchy. Kitchen servants nibble scraps when no one's looking, so the rest goes upstairs. It's a system enforced by centuries of tradition and one sharp steward's glare. Still, there's an odd beauty in it all. The firelight glows against stone walls. The clatter of pans makes a steady percussion, and the laughter weaving through it is as necessary as the bread itself. The castle's morning heartbeat is loudest here, in smoke and sweat and porridge steam. And then, just as suddenly, the mood shifts again. A bell rings somewhere higher up. That's the signal. The Lord will be stirring soon. Trays are assembled, food arranged. Servants straighten clothes, wiping soot from faces with the backs of their hands. The frantic chaos hardens into order, like a dress rehearsal right before opening night. You slip back toward the door, heart racing with the servant's urgency. The smell of bread clings to you, following you out. The kitchens keep roaring behind. But your path is drawing you toward another corner of the morning. The animals waiting restlessly in their straw-scented quarters. The smell hits you before the sound does. A sour, warm, almost sweet reek of hay, manure, and horse sweat drifts across the yard. You wrinkle your nose, but honestly, it's not the worst. At least it's natural. It's the medieval equivalent of eau de farm, and you're about to wade right into it. The stables are alive before dawn, because horses don't politely wait until breakfast. They want feeding now. You push open the stable door, and the noise greets you. Hooves stamping, chains clinking, the occasional impatient snort. Lanterns swing from hooks, throwing jittery light across rows of shaggy bodies shifting in their stalls. Their eyes catch the glow, glimmering like small moons. A groom yawns so wide his jaw cracks, then shoves a forkful of hay into a trough. The horse dives in greedily, crunching like a teenager tearing through chips. This work isn't glamorous, it's survival. Castles rely on horses for transport, hunting, and war. They're as essential as Wi-Fi is today. The animals aren't fed, watered, brushed, and mucked out. The whole system collapses. And let's be real, the noble lord prancing around on a gleaming destrier only looks impressive because 10 exhausted grooms spent dawn shoveling the horse's poop. Here's your mainstream fact. Medieval castles often kept dozens of horses, from sleek warhorses bred for battle to sturdy pack horses for hauling loads. Each type needed specific care. A destrier might get oats, while humbler animals made do with hay and straw. You see the difference in how they're fed now: one stall getting grain measured carefully from a sack, another getting nothing but rough forage. Hierarchy exists even in the barn. And here's the quirky tidbit you didn't know you needed. Some grooms believed brushing a horse's coat in a certain direction could ward off evil spirits. You watch one stable hand stroke a bay mare's neck, muttering a charm under his breath. Is it habit, a superstition? Or maybe just his way of calming the beast? Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in these charms, or if they were just rituals passed down like family recipes. Meanwhile, the sound of mucking fills your ears, shovel scraping, hay rustling, the wet slap of manure hitting a pile. A boy struggles with a barrow almost too big for him, wobbling across the stable like a drunken crab. You flinch as he nearly tips it, but a sharp shout steadies him. No sympathy here. Everyone learns by blistered hands and splinters. You crouch near the straw, listening to the rhythm of grooming brushes. Horses sigh, tails swishing lazily, some clearly enjoying the attention. Others stamp and toss their heads, reminding you these are not tame ponies, but powerful beasts with tempers. One groom swears under his breath when a hoof lands on his boot. He'll limp all day, but he keeps brushing anyway. The smell thickens as the manure pile grows. You'd gag if you weren't trying to act tough. Your modern brain screams for deodorizer. But here, the smell is simply part of life. People even thought stable air could be healthy. Imagine someone bottling it and selling it as rustic farmhouse candle. Hard pass. Above, pigeons roost in the rafters, cooing softly. Their droppings splatter on beams and hay, but no one cares unless it hits someone's shoulder. One lad jokes about it being lucky. The others laugh tiredly, shaking their heads. Humor, again the universal shield. A guard wanders through, checking saddles and tack. Leather straps hang neatly on pegs, polished and oiled. Without care, the straps would snap in battle, and no one wants to be the knight who lost because his buckle broke. You trail your fingers across the smooth leather, feeling the hours of work embedded in every inch. The hierarchy here is as rigid as anywhere. The head groom barks orders, his voice hoarse but firm. He knows each horse like family, calling them by names that sound like medieval rock bands. Thunder, Ashfang, Ironheart. Okay, maybe not quite that dramatic, but you hear names like Bayar, Stott, or Lady, each said with pride. The grooms compete subtly, each wanting their horses to shine brightest when the Lord inspects them later. Here's a moment of reality check. You wouldn't last 5 minutes. Not because of the smell, not because of the muck, but because horses are huge, twitchy, and they know when you're scared. You'd be the one flattened against the wall, praying not to get kicked. And yes, people did get kicked. Broken bones weren't rare. You sigh, realizing your castle resume isn't looking good. The morning feeds continue. Buckets of water are hauled in, sloshing onto boots. You taste the cold damp in the air. Water is as important as food, and if the well runs low, everyone panics. Horses drink gallons, and you picture the endless trips back and forth, arms aching from the weight. The grooms mutter stories to each other as they work. Someone jokes about a horse that supposedly saved a knight in battle. Another swears his mare can sense ghosts. You smile because whether or not that's true, it's exactly the kind of tale that keeps people awake during endless mornings of shoveling. Historians still argue whether castles had official stable boys living full-time in the stables or if they rotated from household servants. Looking around, you believe both. Some of these kids look like they've never left the barn, their clothes permanently smelling of hay. Others seem temporary, drafted in when more hands are needed. Either way, the work is endless, repetitive, but absolutely crucial. The first pale light filters through cracks in the boards, illuminating dust motes that swirl like lazy fairies. Horses snort again, calmer now, bellies filled, coats brushed. The barn's rhythm slows. You feel it's a shift from frantic feeding to steady care. Saddles are checked again, hooves inspected, and ropes tightened. And here comes another quirky detail. Some grooms swore by rubbing garlic or onion on a horse's legs to keep pests away. You watch one smear something pungent on a gray's ankles, the horse twitching its nose in disapproval. The groom shrugs, mutters about flies, and keeps going. Medieval life. 10% science, 90% well. My uncle swore it works. Outside, a cock crows loudly. This time you hear it clearly, not muffled by stone. The world beyond the castle is waking, and the stables feel it too. Horses toss their heads, ears pricked, as though listening. Soon, riders will come for them, messengers, huntsmen, guards. The calm won't last. For now, though, the grooms lean on forks and brush handles, breathing hard. Sweat glistens on their brows despite the cold air. One boy laughs weakly at his own filthy hands, holding them up like trophies. Another mutters about wishing he were back in bed. But there is no bed. There's only the next task and the next, until the Lord's orders arrive. You take one last look around. The flickering lanterns, the straw-strewn floor, the steaming breath of horses rising like clouds. It's messy, noisy, smelly, and strangely beautiful. The stables are their own little kingdom, ruled by routine, bound by necessity. And without this kingdom, the castle outside could not function at all. You slip out into the cold morning air again. The smell of hay clings to you, mixing with smoke from the kitchens. Your ears still ring with the sounds of stamping hooves. And ahead, across the courtyard, you see another line of servants bent under the weight of wooden buckets, heading toward the well. The next part of the morning waits for you, water, cold and heavy, and more vital than anything else. You follow the sloshing footsteps toward the well, and the first thing you notice is the chill. It's the kind of cold that sneaks under your layers and decides to camp out on your spine. Servants shuffle forward in line, each with a yoke slung across their shoulders, wooden buckets dangling on either side. The yokes creak, the buckets rattle, and the water inside sloshes so violently you wonder how much actually makes it back intact. The well sits in the center of the courtyard like a silent overseer. Its stone lip is slick with morning frost, and a heavy rope winds down into the dark unknown. You lean over just far enough to see your reflection wobble in the blackness, and your stomach flips. No guardrails, no warning signs. Fall in, and that's your entire medieval career over. One servant grips the rope hand over hand, lowering the bucket into the depths. You hear the hollow plunk as it hits water, then the grunt of muscles hauling it back. The bucket emerges dripping, droplets sparkling in the faint dawn. Another servant steadies it, pours it into waiting pails, and the process repeats. Efficient, monotonous, exhausting. Here's your mainstream fact. Castle wells were engineering marvels. Some were dug more than 100 feet deep, lined carefully with stone to keep from collapsing. A single well could be the difference between a castle surviving a siege or surrendering. Think of it as the medieval Wi-Fi router. You only notice how important it is when it stops working. And the quirky tidbit. In some places, people tossed charms or coins into wells to keep the water sweet. You glance at this well, and imagine little trinkets sitting at the bottom, tiny prayers wrapped in copper. Was it magic, superstition, or just early water maintenance? Historians still argue whether these rituals were spiritual necessities or just excuses to toss junk. Back in the courtyard, the line of water bearers continues. Each servant balances the heavy yoke with practiced sway, but their faces twist with strain. Shoulders redden, hands blister, and backs bend. You watch a boy stagger as his boot slips on frost. One bucket tips, water splashing across the cobbles, and the boy winces like he's spilled treasure. In a way, he has. Wasting water here isn't just clumsy, it earns a scolding. You trail alongside the bucket brigade. Every splash sounds louder in the still cold air. Some loads go to kitchens because porridge thickens, bread bakes, and ale brews only with steady water supply. Other buckets head for the laundry, already stacked with soiled linens. Another group trudges toward the chapel because even holy hands need washing. Everywhere you look, water is demanded, carried, poured, and demanded again. And here's your reality check. You wouldn't last 3 trips. Those buckets weigh more than your gym dumbbells, and you don't get to set them down halfway. Your shoulders would give out, your grip would fail, and you'd earn yourself a reputation as the clumsy one who can't carry his share. And guess who ends up assigned to latrine duty when they're deemed useless? Yep, you. One servant dumps a bucket over stone steps, scrubbing with a stiff brush. You see the water trickle into drains carved centuries ago, carrying dirt and food scraps into the moat. That moat, not the sparkling, dragon-reflecting pond of fairy tales. More like a grim stew of refuse, algae, and whatever animals wandered too close. The smell proves it whenever the breeze shifts. The castle laundresses arrive, sleeves rolled to elbows, and plunge fabrics into steaming tubs filled with water drawn earlier. They add soap harsh stuff that burns skin if you're not careful and begin stomping, or beating the cloth against boards. The rhythmic slap echoes across the courtyard, blending with the splash of buckets and the steady grunt of servants. It's a chorus of survival. Above you, the faintest glow of sunrise brushes the towers. The world is softening from blue-black to gray-gold. And you realize, this isn't just water, it's time itself. Every hall, every pore, marks the march toward daylight. Without it, the castle would remain frozen, dirty, parched. With it, everything moves forward. Another mainstream fact slips into your ear. Castles without wells sometimes relied on rain cisterns or nearby streams. Those options worked until a siege cut them off. That's why engineers dug so stubbornly into rock, sometimes tunneling sideways to reach hidden springs. It was brutal, dangerous work, but absolutely vital. Meanwhile, a young girl carrying buckets too large for her frame tries to keep pace with older servants. Her face is red, her arms trembling. Someone teases her, calling her duckling. She doesn't answer, just keeps walking. You watch her carefully set the water down in the kitchens, then wipe her brow with the back of her hand. She'll grow into the work, or the work will break her. There's not much middle ground. A donkey brays suddenly, startling you. You turn to see it hitched with barrels strapped across its back. Even animals get pressed into water duty, carrying loads too heavy for people. The beast stomps stubbornly, refusing to move until bribed with a handful of hay. The groom sighs, mutters, curses, and tugs at the reins. Medieval logistics, always one donkey away from collapse. Another quirky tidbit. Some chronicles claim servants used to toss heated stones into cold buckets to make water fit for washing delicate cloth. You spot one boy carrying a stone with tongs, dropping it into a tub, and everyone laughs at the hiss of steam. Maybe it works, maybe it's just entertainment. But it breaks the monotony. The work never ends. Buckets refill, empty, refill again. Hands crack from cold, shoulders ache, but no one dares stop. The steward passes through, tallying who's working, who's slacking. His eyes are sharp, his memory sharper. The threat of losing bread at supper is enough to keep everyone moving. The courtyard puddles underfoot, mud forming between cobblestones. Servants slip, curse quietly, and keep walking. The chill water seeps into boots, socks, skin. You shiver along with them, realizing this is their treadmill, no end, no pause, just the same steps over and over. And yet, there's a strange camaraderie in the suffering. Servants trade jokes in low voices, laughing at the donkey's stubbornness, mocking the steward's stern nose, or daring each other to spill less than yesterday. Their humor is brittle, but binding. You laugh softly, knowing it's what keeps them upright. The chapel bell tolls once, sharp in the morning air. Heads lift. The first call to prayer is coming, which means time is short. The buckets must be emptied before Bodhi's head inside. Suddenly, the pace quickens. Water sloshes faster, splashing onto skirts and boots. Voices sharpen, orders bark. You follow the final trip to the kitchens, where steam now pours from pots, the heat thickening the smoky air. Buckets clang against stone, emptying into cauldrons. The porridge will thicken, the bread will bake, and the ale will brew. All because servants carried the weight of the castle, one slosh at a time. You step back into the courtyard, your arms aching just from watching. The sun finally breaks the horizon, painting the walls golden. For a moment, the wet stones gleam, and the puddles shimmer like silver. The work has been endless, repetitive, exhausting, and yet it creates beauty without meaning to. And just as you catch your breath, you hear another set of footsteps and brooms scraping across the hall floor. The castle's heart is shifting again, moving from buckets to rushes, from water to sweeping. The great hall is waiting, and it has to look perfect before the Lord ever sees it. The great hall looms ahead like a cavern cut into stone, but warmer, more human. This is where the castle breathes together. Meals, ceremonies, feasts, judgments, and whispered politics all tangled under one smoky roof. By the time you enter, the cleaning crew has already begun, and the smell hits you first. A mix of damp rushes, wood smoke, stale ale, and sweat baked into the beams over centuries. The hall's stone floor disappears beneath mats of rushes-long stalks cut from riverbanks, spread across the surface to soften footsteps and hide dirt. Or rather, to pretend to hide it. Because rushes don't just lie there politely. They collect everything: spilled food, scraps, grease, spilled drink, dog hair, vermin droppings. That's why today, like every other week, servants are stripping out the old and bringing in fresh. You watch a boy rake armfuls of wilted rushes into piles. A rat darts free, tail whipping, and the boy yelps before chasing it with his rake. The older servants laugh every cleaning day, becomes a rodent hunt. A dog joins in, barking and pouncing, until the rat vanishes through a crack in the wall. Victory is declared anyway, and the cleaning continues. Mainstream fact: rush-strewn floors were the medieval carpet. In wealthier castles, they weren't just common river rushes, but fragrant herbs, sweet woodruff, lavender, meadowsweet mixed in two mask smells. Imagine a giant medieval air freshener. The richer the lord, the better his hall smelled. Or at least, the stronger the attempt to cover the stink. And here's a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, in especially fine households, dried flowers or mint would be tucked into the rushes, so guests' feet crushed them with every step, releasing little bursts of scent, like walking across a medieval potpourri. Doesn't change the fact that under those stalks still lurked weeks of grime, but hey, presentation mattered. Two servants work in tandem, tugging heavy bundles of old rushes toward the courtyard. Each load sheds dust and bits of bone from last night's supper. A woman follows behind, broom in hand, sweeping the bare stones. Her strokes raise gray clouds that catch in the shafts of light falling from high windows. The light looks holy, but the sneezing fit that follows is anything but. You're handed a broom. It's rough, bristled with twigs bound by twine, and the handle splinters threaten your palms. You sweep alongside the others, pushing grit toward the walls, realizing quickly this is no gentle dusting. It's labor. Your shoulders burn, your wrists ache. And still the dirt seems endless, as though the stones themselves generate it. Nearby, someone scrubs at the long oak tables with sand and water. Soap is scarce and expensive. Sand is cheap. The gritty mixture scours grease from the wood, leaving the surface rough but clean enough for trenchers and goblets. The servant hums as he works, the rhythm of sand against wood, a steady percussion. You glance upward, and there's the real heart of the hall, the great hearth. Its fire hasn't been fully lit yet, only embers glowing red. But even in its slumber, the hearth dominates, stretching tall enough to roast an ox. Black soot stains the stone chimney, a reminder of years of feasts and winters survived. A scullion kneels at its base, poking the embers, coaxing new flame to life. Each spark dances like a promise that warmth is coming. Mainstream fact: the great hall's hearth was more than a fireplace. It was the gathering center, the literal survival mechanism. With no central heating, the hall fire meant life. The smoke drifted upward to vents in the roof or lingered in the rafters, darkening beams but warming bones. Without it, nights turned deadly. And the quirky tidbit. Cats and even small dogs often curled up near the embers, tolerated because they doubled as rodent control. You spot one now scruffy, one ear bent blinking lazily from the hearthstones. It yawns, stretches, and returns to sleep, perfectly indifferent to the chaos of servants working around it. The hall is wide enough to fit 100 souls, yet every corner is alive with motion. Tapestries are beaten free of dust outside, their woven threads telling stories of hunts, battles, and saints. You touch one briefly, surprised by its roughness, wool and linen. Not silk hand, realize these weren't just decoration, but insulation. Soft armor against cold walls. Meanwhile, benches are dragged back into line, the scrape of wood echoing. A young servant nearly topples a stool, catches it, and blushes crimson. An older woman clucks her tongue, mutters something about clumsy hands, and orders him to polish instead. He obeys, pulling a rag from his belt and rubbing the wood with rendered fat until it shines with greasy luster. You're beginning to see it clearly. This hall is not just stone and timber, it's performance. Every sweep, every polish, every herb scattered underfoot is preparing the stage for the Lord's arrival. And every servant is both actor and invisible stagehand. When the highborn walk in, they won't notice the effort, only the result. But you, standing here, see the exhaustion in the bent backs. The sweat darkening collars, the dirt ground into nails. Another mainstream fact whispers to you. Meals in the Great Hall were often served in two waves. First, the Lord, his family, and honored guests at the high table, raised on a dais. Then the household staff, guards, and lower guests at the side tables. Food cascaded down in order of importance. If you were at the bottom, good luck finding meat left on the bone. The quirky detail. Trenchers' thick slabs of stale bread served as plates. After soaking up meat, juice, and gravy, they were eaten by the poor or given to beggars. So next time you've grown about doing dishes, remember, medieval people ate theirs. The sun has climbed higher now, striking the tall windows. The hall glows gold, though smoke drifts in lazy ribbons, softening the light. Someone shakes herbs across the new rushes lavender. Mintanda Hall smells fresher, though beneath it lingers the faint musk of dogs and people. And speaking of dogs, two hounds bound in suddenly, chasing each other, nails clicking on stone. They skid, nearly topple a servant carrying a bucket, then vanish under the tables. The steward storms in moments later, bellowing about order, but the servants only grin behind his back. Dogs belong in the hall almost as much as people. They clean bones, guard scraps, and remind everyone that castles weren't sterile monuments, but living, breathing ecosystems of humans and beasts. Another boy climbs a ladder to snuff out candle stubs, still clinging to iron sconces. He replaces them with fresh tallow candles, their greasy scent filling the air once lit. You imagine the hall at night, hundreds of tiny flames dancing, shadows leaping across tapestries, faces half-lit in golden glow. A vision of both grandeur and gloom. Your broom finally rests against the wall. The floor gleams with new rushes, the tables shine, the hearth crackles awake, and the tapestries hang freshly shaken. It looks like a hall worthy of feasting, though you know what's hidden under the surface. You've seen the rats scatter, the grime scraped, the sweat poured. The illusion is ready for its audience. And here's the kicker. You catch your reflection in a polished pitcher. Hair messy, skin flushed, hands raw from sweeping. You look like one of them now. Another servant swallowed into the machine of the hall. And oddly, there's pride in that. Because even though you're invisible to the nobles, you've helped build the day they'll enjoy. The steward claps once, sharp as a command. Enough, he says. Prepare for the Lord's rising. The servants scatter, each to their stations. You feel the energy shift, the frantic cleaning gives way to anticipation. Soon the great doors will open, and the hall will transform again, from workshop to theater, from labor to ceremony. But before that, you're swept along to the kitchens, because the Lord's breakfast isn't going to serve itself. And kitchens, they make the hall look quiet. Up a narrow spiral stair you go, feeling the stones still cool beneath your boots, the air changing with each step, less smoky, more scented with wool, beeswax, and the faint sharpness of lavender sachets tucked into linens. Here in the private chambers, the work of servants shifts from brooms and buckets to fabrics and combs. The clang of pots and the barking of hounds below fade into muffled echoes. Up here, the castle has a quieter hum, but don't be fooled, it's just as busy, only with softer footsteps and whispered voices. The chambermaids are already at it, arms loaded with fresh sheets, their faces pink from the effort of dragging them up flights of stairs. Beds aren't neat little rectangles, mind you. They're massive wooden frames, often piled with straw mattresses, feather toppers if you're lucky, and heavy woolen blankets stacked like you're preparing for a medieval avalanche. You lend a hand, tugging at one corner, and nearly fall backward as the thick bedding refuses to cooperate. The maid smirks, don't fight it, tuck it, and shows you the trick of folding the corners into submission. Mainstream historical fact here. Wealthy medieval households, especially in castles, often layered mattresses stuffed with straw, wool, or feathers to create real luxury, while common folk down in the village usually slept on simple sacks of straw. The contrast between your noble host's towering bed and the hapalots outside the walls couldn't be sharper. And the quirky tidbit. Sometimes nobles even shared beds with favored guests as a sign of trust and honor. Not like that, though historians admit the boundaries could blur. It was simply practical, too. Beds were expensive, rooms drafty, and warmth scarce. Sharing a mattress could mean forging alliances and saving toes from frostbite. You still wrestling the blankets when another maid enters, carrying a wooden comb and a box of pins. She sets them down on the table near a basin of water, already prepared for the morning wash. You dip your fingers in cold, shockingly so, and she laughs at your grimace. Warm water was a luxury, rarely spared for anything less than bathing. Here, splashing your face awake with icy liquid is part of the daily routine, like a medieval version of your morning coffee. The mistress's garments lie folded on a bench, waiting. Linen, chemise, wool gown. Maybe even a fur-trimmed surcoat if the weather bites. You're struck by the sheer number of layers. First, the undergarments, which soak up sweat and spare the outer clothes from constant washing. Then the kirtle or gown, snug at the waist, sometimes laced with a cord so tight you wonder how anyone could breathe. Over that, if the lady wants to show her wealth, goes a robe lined with fur or embroidered with colored thread. It's less a wardrobe and more an architectural project, each layer supporting the next. Historians still argue whether medieval clothing was truly comfortable or a daily burden. Some claim that the linen base layers were soft, breathable, and even practical, while others suggest the endless wool and tightly laced garments made every day feel like attending a formal wedding where you can sit down properly. You try tugging the laces yourself and nearly cut off circulation in your fingers. Now comes the hair. One girl kneels behind a stool, comb in hand, already preparing for the ritual. Medieval combs were carved from wood, bone, or even ivory for the wealthy. This one is wood, smooth from years of use. She begins pulling it through the mistress's long hair, gently, but with the occasional tug that makes her wince. You feel sympathetic pangs. Medieval hair care didn't come with conditioner or anti-frizz serum. A little scented oil, maybe rosemary or lavender, was the height of luxury. The quirky tidbit. Some medieval ladies powdered their hair with ground herbs, flowers, or even flour to freshen its hoar disguise when they hadn't washed in weeks, which, let's be honest, was most of the time. Water wasn't trusted, and full baths were rare. Instead, hair care became more about covering and styling than washing. You're handed a ribbon and awkwardly try to help braid. The strands slip from your fingers, and your attempt looks more like tangled rope than elegant plait. The chambermaid chuckles kindly and redoes it in seconds, fingers moving fast as a harpist's. Soon the lady's hair is woven into a crown-like braid. wrapped tight and pinned beneath a veil. The transformation is stunning. Hair that just moments ago looked like bedmuss straw now looks regal. It's polished, almost untouchable. You're reminded that clothes and grooming weren't just about vanity, they were political. Every fold of fabric, every embroidered sleeve, every carefully pinned veil spoke volumes about wealth, status, and alliances. Appearances mattered because in a world without Instagram or press releases, how you looked was your public statement. The servants knew it too. They were the invisible magicians ensuring their lord or lady's presentation never faltered. Another mainstream fact: lords and ladies rarely dressed themselves. The act of being dressed was a sign of rank. Chambermaids and squires handled the laces, pins, and layers, while the noble simply lifted arms or turned when told. Imagine outsourcing your daily struggle with socks. That's power. The quirky detail: sometimes chambermaids or valets were so trusted they became confidants, privy to secrets whispered while brushing hair or fastening gowns. Those quiet minutes in the chamber could make or break alliances. After all, who else saw you vulnerable, half-dressed, and grumpy from bed? The chamber fills with the sense of beeswax polish, wool warmed by bodies, and faint herbs sprinkled in the rushes underfoot. You take a deep breath, trying not to sneeze, and watch the ritual complete itself. The Lord's garments are prepared too: linen shirt, hose, perhaps shows tied to a belt, a tunic belted at the waist, and boots that require tugging and cursing to get on. Then a cloak, if the weather calls for drama. His squire fusses with the sword belt, ensuring it hangs just so, because even breakfast needs a touch of menace. You notice a side table with a tiny chest of wooden combs, pins, and ointments. There's also a mirror, not glass, but polished bronze, cloudy and warped. The reflection is fuzzy, bending your nose into a potato shape, but it's better than nothing. You grin at your distorted face and quickly step aside as the chambermaid carries it to her lady. Historians still argue whether personal hygiene was truly horrible in the Middle Ages or simply different from ours. Evidence shows daily hand and face washing was common among the wealthy. And teeth cleaning with cloths or herbal pastes wasn't unusual. Yet full baths were rare, reserved for special occasions or illnesses. To you, the chamber smells better than expected, not fresh like spring rain, but cleaner than the barnyard you feared. By now, the sun has fully broken through the narrow windows, casting light across embroidered pillows and carved furniture. The chamber feels alive, humming with preparation. Outside, the muffled sounds of the great hall drift upward, the scrape of benches, the call of voices. Soon the lord and lady will descend, clothed, combed, presentable, ready to embody the very order that servants have quietly crafted around them. You step back, realizing that this stage of the morning is as important as the kitchens or the hall. Without clean clothes and polished appearances, the performance of authority falters. Nobles might command armies and estates, but their first victory each day is simply looking the part, thanks to a dozen unseen hands. The lady rises, smoothing her gown, veil in place, rings glittering at her fingers. The lord adjusts his cloak with a practiced flick, nods to his squire. The chambermaids bow low, silent as shadows. And just like that, the actors are ready for the day's first scene. You follow them toward the stairs, trying not to trip on your own feet as their garments sweep past. The castle is about to wake fully, and you've just watched the transformation that makes its rulers shine. The hush of the private chambers gives way to the open air of the staircase, where the smell of bread from the kitchens drifts upward, mingling with wood smoke and damp stone. You follow in the wake of the Lord himself, his cloak sweeping, his boots thudding on the steps. He's already fully assembled linen, wool, a belt heavy with dagger, every fold carefully arranged by those invisible chamber hands. This is the moment when the house's quiet work pivots into display. The great hall you helped clean earlier now waits like a stage. You slip in behind the entourage, and there's a collective pause as servants. Guards and stewards straighten spines, lower gazes, and prepare themselves for the entrance. The doors open wider. The Lord strides forward. Every eye lifts, every bow deepens, and the ordinary space you swept with a twig broom becomes a theater of authority. Mainstream fact: this entrance wasn't just habit, it was ritual. Medieval lords established presence through ceremony. Even a simple walk into the hall carried weight reminders of hierarchy, loyalty, and discipline. People literally waited to move or eat until their superior had taken his place. It wasn't just manners, it was survival of order. The Lord makes his way to the high table on the dais, the long oak boards gleaming from the scrubbing you remember. His seat sits higher than the rest, deliberately so, the better to see and be seen. The lady follows, her gown trailing, her veil catching the light from the open shutters. Squires hover near, one ready to fetch, another to answer questions, a third to guard. Breakfast arrives. Trenchers of bread, wedges of cheese, perhaps some dried fruit from stores, and mugs of watered ale. The Lord doesn't lift a hand himself. Servants place the trenchers, pour the ale, carve the bread. Even lifting a goblet can be a job for someone else if ceremony demands it. You can't help thinking it's a lot of effort to butter toast. Quirky tidbit: not all lords liked pomp. Some, according to anecdotes, delighted in breaking the solemn, mood-grabbing food with their hands, cracking jokes, or even inviting favored knights to sit close in a breach of strict seating order. Yet those moments of informality mattered as much as ceremony. They showed which rules could bend, who was truly trusted. Around the edges of the hall, other servants wait in stillness. The steward keeps one eye on the Lord's mood, ready to shuffle requests or complaints. A messenger hovers with a scroll tucked under his arm, rehearsing what he'll say. The chaplain clears his throat softly, a signal he'd like the family to attend prayers afterward. Historians still argue whether the daily routines of a lord were carefully scheduled or largely improvised around sudden news and duties. Some accounts suggest a rigid timetable: meal, prayer, court, inspection, while others show a much more flexible, chaotic rhythm shaped by visitors, disputes, or even weather. Watching this morning unfold, you suspect it's both. A skeleton of ritual with flesh that shifts by the day. The breakfast itself is quiet, punctuated by the scrape of knives on bread and the occasional command for more ale. You notice that food here isn't piled high. This isn't a feast, it's fuel, but the way it's served still carries weight. The Lord's trencher gets the soft inner slices of bread, while lower tables will later get crusts. His cheese wedge gleams with fewer cracks. His fruit bowl holds the plumpest figs. Even in breakfast, the message is, rank matters. When he finishes, the dishes are whisked away. A servant brings a basin and towel for hand washing. No one leaves grease streaks on noble sleeves. You catch the faint scent of rosewater as the lady dries her fingers, a detail meant to signal refinement and wealth. Here comes the morning's real business. The steward steps forward, unrolling a parchment. His voice is clear, practiced. He reads reports: grain supplies, laborers late to the fields, a broken cart on the road to market. Each issue is laid out like stones on a chessboard, waiting for the Lord's hand to move them. You feel the air shift as the Lord listens, occasionally nodding, sometimes frowning. At one point he bangs a fist lightly against the table, and everyone jolts. The problem? Someone stole hens from the castle's flock. You stifle a laugh because the mighty lord of the keep is furious about poultry. But of course, it's not really about chickens, it's about order, justice, and the idea that nothing, not even a missing egg, escapes his gaze. Quirky tidbit: some lords handled small matters personally, doling out punishments or rewards on the spot. Others delegated endlessly, letting stewards or bailiffs do the dirty work. Which style was better? Historians still argue whether micromanaging made a lord respected or resented. Watching this man fume about hens, You suspect it could go either way. The petitions continue. A tenant wants timber rights, a knight requests leave to visit family, a messenger announces a merchant caravan approaching. Each moment carries the rhythm of control, questions, answers, commands. You imagine this is as exhausting as mucking out stables, just with fewer rats and more parchment. And here, as where the morning edges into theater again. The Lord Docent T, just aside. He performs decision-making. He pauses, he considers, he lets silence stretch until everyone in the hall shifts nervously. Then, finally, he speaks, voice measured, heavy with authority. The effect is clear. Every word is treasure, every ruling a stone in the wall of power. Meanwhile, behind this grand play, the invisible work continues. A servant crouches to collect crumbs from the rushes so mice don't swarm later. Another tends the hearth, stoking fire until warmth reaches the dais. You spot the hounds again, nosing under benches for scraps. The hall hums with layers of activities, some loud and commanding, others quiet and necessary. The lady, too, has her role. Between petitions, she speaks softly to the chaplain, discusses cloth supplies with a maid, even shares a quick aside with a visiting knight. Her presence isn't passive. It's another center of gravity, pulling decisions toward domestic and spiritual matters. The chambermaids hover nearby, veils and combs tucked under arms in case her appearance needs a touch-up. Even at breakfast, the performance of nobility can't falter. Then comes the Lord's move to rise. He pushes back from the high table. And in an instant, the hall reacts. Benches scrape, bodies bow, silence thickens. The meeting is over. The authority remains. He gestures to a squire to fetch his cloak, and just like that, the rhythm shifts again. Morning business has been settled, and new tasks await elsewhere in the keep. You follow him out into the courtyard, squinting as the sunlight hits your eyes. He's already speaking with another servant, pointing toward the stables, discussing repairs to the wall. The day is unfolding like a scroll, each line another duty. And you realize something? For all his commanding presence, the Lord is as much bound by routine as the lowest scullion. His morning is shaped by the quiet work of others' maids, cooks, sweepers, scribes, without whom his authority would crumble like old mortar. He may sit higher on the dais, but the whole keep props him up. You take a breath, feeling the damp morning air settle in your lungs. The castle hums louder now, fully awake. And though you've walked alongside the Lord, you're starting to wonder whether the quieter rhythms the chambermaid's combs, the steward's parchment, the servant's rushes are where the real power lies. You trail after the shifting current of servants and squires until the hum of the courtyard softens. The stone walls feel cooler again, the air hushed as if the castle itself holds its breath. This is the path to the chapel, and even you start instinctively lowering your footsteps. As though loud shoes might offend heaven, the chapel isn't large. In many castles, it was little more than a vaulted chamber carved into the keep, with narrow windows and stone benches. The door creaks when pushed open, and the first thing that hits you is the scent. Beeswax candles burning low, smoke curling upward to stain the ceiling with faint black whorls. Incense, too sweet, resinous, clinging to your throat. After bread, hens, and chambermaids, this feels like stepping onto another stage entirely. At the small altar, a priest already waits, his hands clasped, his voice a murmur as he begins the morning prayers. The Latin syllables roll out, steady, practiced, not intended to be fully understood by the household listening. You shuffle into the back, finding a place among sleepy guards and yawning pages. Everyone tries to look pious, but you notice one knight fighting to keep his eyes open, head bobbing like a pigeon. Mainstream fact. Daily prayer was a fundamental rhythm in medieval life, especially in noble households. The castle's chapel wasn't just a spiritual retreat, was a political necessity. Attending services showed loyalty to both God and Lord. Skipping them could look like negligence or, worse, heresy. And the quirky tidbit. Some lords, pressed for time or simply impatient, ordered their priests to speed it up. There are recorded complaints of chaplains who rush through the offices at a near sprint to keep their patron happy. Imagine muttering divine verses like an auctioneer so the boss can get back to yelling about hens. You glance around the space. The walls are bare stone, though a tapestry hangs behind the altar faded, but woven with saints and angels. The candles flicker against it, throwing halos that wobble with each draft. A carved wooden crucifix looms above the figure of Christ, staring downward with serene solemnity. Even if you don't understand the Latin, the weight of the ritual presses into you. The lady kneels gracefully on a cushion near the front, veil trailing, hands folded. The Lord takes his place with less grace but more authority, his cloak pooling around his boots. The servants line the walls, murmuring responses, bowing when the priest lifts his hands. For a moment, hierarchy softens here everyone kneels on the same stone. Yet even in prayer, order persists. The cushions at the front are softer, the candles burn brighter. Historians still argue whether piety in castles was deeply felt devotion or another layer of performance. Was the Lord truly humbled here? Or was it one more chance to be seen displaying righteousness? Watching him adjust his cloak, side-eye his steward, and nod faintly when the chaplain praises noble virtue, you suspect it's both. Faith and politics were braided like the lady's hair earlier. Inseparable, tight, occasionally tangled. The priest's chant grows louder, echoing against the stone. You catch a fragment you recognize, Pater Noster, the Lord's Prayer. Around you, guards mouth the words half-heartedly, some stumbling, others mumbling. One boy crosses himself backward and earns a sharp elbow from his neighbor. You suppress a grin. Even in solemn worship, human clumsiness sneaks in. Another quirky tidbit. Relics often rested in castle chapels. Bones of saints, splinters of the true cross, even vials of mysterious dust objects believed to channel divine power. Some were authentic, some dubious at best. Imagine paying your respects to a saintly toenail. That might actually be a pig bone, what people believed, and that belief lent the castle an aura of holy protection. As the priest lifts a chalice, you hear a dog bark outside. It echoes faintly through the chapel stone, a reminder that the world beyond keeps moving. The priest doesn't pause. He's practiced ignoring earthly distractions. The chant continues. Incense smoke thickens. The guard next to you nods off entirely. His snore earns a glare, and he snaps awake, crossing himself twice as if to erase the sin of drowsiness. The ritual closes with a final blessing. The priest's hands spread wide. The congregation bows, mutters amen, and slowly rises, joints cracking. Candles sputter, their wax pooling, dripping like frozen tears. The lady lingers a moment longer, lips moving in private prayer. The Lord waits, impatient but respectful, until she finishes. Then the spell breaks. Everyone files out in order, the nobility first, servants after. You shuffle with the tail end, breathing in fresher air once you leave the incense behind. The morning feels different. No more formal, more settled. It's as though the castle has passed from sleep into full awareness, its heartbeat set by both breakfast and blessing. Mainstream fact, again. Chaplains weren't only spiritual leaders, but also educators, scribes, and sometimes advisors. They kept accounts, wrote letters, and taught noble children to read. Their role in the castle was far more than saying prayers. It was weaving the household into the wider web of Christendom. The quirky aside, chaplains often doubled as rumor spreaders. Because they heard confessions and prayers, they knew who quarreled, who cheated, who fretted. They couldn't reveal secrets directly, but somehow gossip still seeped into the halls. Call it divine leakage. As you step into the courtyard, the sun is brighter now, shadows shorter. The rhythm of the castle feels fully underway, servants carrying baskets, knights preparing horses, children chasing each other with sticks. The hush of the chapel fades behind you, replaced by the noise of a living fortress. And you realize this? Prayer wasn't a pause in the castle's morning. It was another cog in the wheel, shaping how the day unfolded. Just as kitchens, stables, and great halls created order through work, the chapel created order through belief. Even the yawning knight, the mumbling guard, the impatient lord all participated, because skipping would fracture the performance of unity. For a moment, you stand still, letting the sunlight warm your face after the candlelit gloom. You smell bread again, hear the clink of armor, see a flock of birds wheel above the towers. The day stretches ahead, and the castle's routines spin on, humming like a vast, intricate clock. And while you may have dodged dozing off in chapel, the rest of the morning promises no such mercy. Because outside these walls, another world presses in, and its sounds are already drifting your way. The moment you leave the chapel's shadowed doorway, the castle greets you with a surge of noise. Metal rings against metal, hooves clatter over cobbles, and someone is shouting orders from the far side of the yard. The sun has risen higher, sharpening every edge of stone and armor. You squint, then realize you've stepped right into the hive of martial preparation. Men-at-arms stand in formation, adjusting helmets and testing the weight of spears. Their tunics bear the Lord's colors bright fabric against dull stone. Squires dart between them, fetching buckles, tightening straps, carrying shields almost as tall as themselves. You quickly sidestep before one nearly trips over your feet, muttering something under his breath that is definitely not in Latin. Mainstream historical fact. Daily weapons practice was an essential routine in any functioning castle. Even in peacetime, warriors drilled constantly. Training kept muscles ready, built unity, and reminded everyone that this fortress wasn't just a house, it was a military machine. Skipping practice was like letting your phone battery drain to 2% before leaving the house. Reckless, foolish, and guaranteed to leave you panicking later, fueling against a wall and watch. The captain of arms barks commands, his voice carrying across the yard. Lines shift, spears lower, shields raise, and the soldiers move in unison like parts of a single clanking beast. Dust rises from their boots, catching the light in a hazy golden cloud. Meanwhile, at the side of the yard, a group of younger squires clumsily sword fight with wooden wasters. They swing too hard, overextend, and one promptly drops his weapon when his opponent smacks his knuckles. The older knights chuckle, shaking their heads. You suspect these kids will carry bruised hands and bruised egos for the rest of the week. Quirky tidbit. Some knights believed in practicing on wooden dummies called quintons rotating posts with shields or sandbags attached. The idea was simple. Strike the shield, and if you didn't dodge quickly enough, the sandbag would swing around and whack you in the back of the head. Think of it as medieval dodgeball with concussion risk. You glance around, half expecting to see one here, but today, it's all sparring, no slapstick. The clang of steel grows sharper as more serious drills begin. Knights unsheath real swords, though blunted for safety, and pair off. The rhythm of parry, strike, parry, step echoes like drumming. Sparks even fly once when a blow lands at just the wrong angle. Everyone pretends it was intentional. Historians still argue whether this kind of training was daily ritual or more occasional. Some sources insist knights drilled each morning as faithfully as breakfast. Others suggest that many nobles, preferring to delegate, let their bodies soften between campaigns. Watching the sweat-soaked fighters before you, you lean toward the first story, though you can't shake the image of a few lazy lords pretending their exercise was lifting a goblet repeatedly. Beyond the fighters, horses stamp in a separate corral. Grooms lead them in circles, brushing coats until they shine like liquid bronze. Warhorses weren't just transportation. They were status symbols and lethal weapons. Each one cost a small fortune. You notice a groom carefully tying a bright ribbon into a main knot for battle. Obviously, but because even war beasts deserve to look fabulous. Another quirky detail. Horses sometimes wore their own armor, called barding. Imagine a giant metal-clad beast charging at you, snorting steam with a knight on top. Terrifying, yes, but also extremely expensive and absurdly heavy. Training both rider and mount to move as one was a daily headache. The medieval equivalent of syncing your Bluetooth device with your correct sept instead of forgetting playlists, you risked getting skewered. You watch a squire struggle to mount, foot slipping on the stirrup, horse rolling its eyes with deep equine patience. Eventually, two other squires shove him upward until he lands in the saddle with all the grace of a sack of flour. The captain yells, the knights laugh, and the horse just sighs, resigned to another awkward passenger. Meanwhile, archers line up along the wall walk, longbows taller than some of the boys holding them. They notch arrows, draw back with strained arms, and release. Thuds echo as shafts strike hay targets. A few miss entirely, arrows clattering uselessly against stone. You duck instinctively when one zips too close for comfort. No one seems alarmed apparently. Stray arrows are just part of the vibe. Mainstream fact: English longbowmen famously dominated battles like Agincourt in 1415, firing deadly volleys that could pierce armor. Training for such accuracy required constant practice. Bows weren't casual props. Drawing one properly demanded incredible strength. Some skeletons of medieval archers show warped spines and enlarged shoulder bones from lifelong use. Talk about a career leaving its mark. Another quirky tidbit: arrows were sometimes tipped with substances like quicklime or even rotten matter, intended to infect wounds. You grimace, imagining the dual pain of puncture and poison. Thankfully, today's training arrows are simple wood and steel, no surprise infections included. The drills continue, and you catch snippets of banter. One guard jokes about having morning sword arm, the medieval cousin of bedhead. Another swears his weapon shrank since yesterday, blaming the blacksmith for making his blade heavier overnight. You can't help but laugh. Even in serious training, humor slips through the cracks. Dust clings to your shoes now, stirred up by marching boots and hooves. The sun is high enough to make armor glint painfully bright. Sweat stings your eyes. You suddenly understand why so many accounts of castles mention constant repairs. Everything from straps to sword edges to shoe soles wore down fast under this relentless grind. And here's where another scholarly debate surfaces. Were these routines meant to prepare for real war, or were they largely symbolic displays of readiness? Some argue the endless drills reinforced hierarchy more than skill, reminding peasants and visitors that this lord commanded warriors at all times. Watching the synchronized movements, the captains barked orders. The polished helmets catching light, you see how spectacle mattered just as much as technique. It's one thing to be ready for battle. It's another to look ready. You wander toward the edge of the yard, where a lone fighter practices with a poleaxe. The weapon is brutal, a combination of axe, spear, and hammer. He swings with frightening power, embedding the blade deep into a wooden post. Chips fly. You step back instinctively, imagining what that would do to a person. Then, with eerie calm, he straightens, wipes his brow, and goes again. Quirky aside, medieval manuals, called fight books, survive with detailed illustrations of combat techniques. Some even show cheeky moves like stomping on an opponent's foot mid-duel. It's comforting to know that even in high chivalry, someone thought, yes, but what if I just kicked him where it hurts? The training session winds down with tired faces, dented shields, and sweat-darkened tunics. Knights unbuckle armor, grateful to breathe freely again. Horses are led away, snorting in relief. Archers collect arrows, squabbling over whose aim was better. The captain claps his hands, dismissing them with gruff approval. You realize the castle's morning has come full circle. Kitchens fed the people, chapels fed their souls, and now the yard has honed their steel. Every layer of routine adds another thread to the fortress's tapestry of survival. Without practice, the castle is a hollow shell. With it, it becomes a coiled spring, ready to defend, ready to impress. ready to remind anyone watching from outside that this place is not to be trifled with. As the dust settles, you breathe deep, filling your lungs with air that smells of sweat, straw, and faint iron. The courtyard grows quieter. Servants sweep away debris, pages chase each other with sticks again, and the great machine of the castle shifts into its next rhythm. And just as you think things are slowing down, a bell tolls from the tower. Its sound rolls across stone, heavy, insistent. The next stage of the morning routine has arrived, and it promises a different kind of clangor, not of weapons, but of voices. The bell's deep, sonorous tolls ripple across the castle, announcing the gathering of voices and the start of administrative routines that keep the entire fortress alive. You follow the echoing clang as it guides you toward the inner courtyard where scribes, stewards, and clerks have already assembled, quills poised over parchment, ink pots shimmering like tiny pools of night. Scrolls, letters, and accounts lie scattered across benches, ready to be sorted, read, and acted upon. Mainstream historical fact. Record-keeping was essential in medieval castles, especially those overseeing large estates. Stewards tracked rent, labor obligations, grain storage, and livestock. Mismanaged accounts could spell famine or revolt. A castle might withstand a siege, but poorly recorded resources could cripple it from within. You see the gravity in every clerk's face, the sharp focus of those whose pens wield influence silently. Quirky tidbit: some castles maintained error logs scribbled in the margins of ledgers, noting mistakes in accounting or misbehavior of servants. One surviving note reads, "Thomas spilled ale in the ledger. Blame the ink, not the man." A medieval version of "Oops, my bad," immortalized in elegant script. The stewards begin their rounds, calling out instructions. One orders a scribe to draft a letter to a neighboring lord regarding timber for repairs. Another inquires about the miller, his tone clipped and impatient. You realize this is the pulse of the castle, quieter than a forge or courtyard, but just as vital. A single misplaced order here could ripple into chaos outside these walls. You spot a young page scurrying across the stone floor, carrying letters tied with string. His movements are precise, almost ceremonial, as if stepping on shadows might disrupt the balance of power. You follow him past the stables, through the servants' hall, and toward the gatehouse, noticing every carved stone and iron bar that frames his path. Historians still argue whether the level of bureaucracy in castles represented actual administrative necessity or performed symbolic authority. Were these ledgers functional, or did they primarily convey that the lord was organized and in control? From your vantage point, it seems to be both. Precision mattered, but appearance of order was equally critical. Meanwhile, the castle's kitchens begin a new rhythm. Pies are lined on long tables, soups simmer, and the clatter of knives resumes with renewed vigor. You smell roasting meat pork, probably, and faint smoke from the hearth mingles with aromatic herbs. The cook instructs his apprentices, each word precise, each movement rehearsed. A silent choreography that turns raw ingredients into nourishment fit for nobility. Quirky tidbit: sometimes kitchen staff would hide small treats in the pies for themselves or favored servants, medieval form of Easter egg. Occasionally, these treats were simple nuts. Sometimes a slice of meat slipped by unnoticed. You can imagine the quiet delight when a scullion bites into something unexpected, a reward for surviving the morning's chaos. Back in the courtyard, horses are being groomed for travel or inspection. You notice a rider adjusting stirrups while a groom polishes the bit until it gleams like silver. These are not just aesthetic details. A well-cared-for horse signals wealth and attention to duty. Nobility judged the competence of a lord not only by his command, but by the condition of his mounts. As you wander through the castle, you observe the subtle coordination required to keep everything running. A messenger climbs the spiral staircase, delivering news of incoming merchants. A pair of servants haul sacks of grain from storage. A child scampers behind, playing with a wooden toy sword, oblivious to the adult world unfolding around him. The juxtaposition of innocence and responsibility is striking. Historians still debate the daily rhythm of castle life. Some suggest mornings were strictly regimented, flowing from chores to meals to training, almost militaristic in their precision. Others claim the pace was flexible, adapted to immediate needs, weather, or whim. You see evidence for both as the castle balances order and chaos simultaneously, the invisible gears turning with quiet inevitability. A scribe pauses mid-letter, listening to the bell that signals the arrival of the Lord in the courtyard. Papers are gathered, inkpots sealed, and the procession forms. You watch as the Lord descends from the tower, cloak brushing against the stone, boots clattering against the stairs. He surveys the courtyard with practiced scrutiny, every gesture deliberate, signaling control and confidence. Quirky tidbit: some lords would carry small personal charms, lucky coin, a fragment of saint's bone, a carved stone, believing these objects protected them during inspections or disputes. Even the most rational commander relied on a little superstition to keep nerves steady. The Lord addresses his household briefly, checking reports, issuing orders for repairs, and confirming assignments. His voice carries authority. Yet the efficiency of the response depends entirely on the prior work of stewards, scribes, and servants. Without their preparation, his words would be empty, echoing against stone walls. The machinery of the castle relies on countless invisible hands and minds, each essential in its own quiet way. Outside the gates, traders begin to arrive. Caravans creak with wheels, animals huff and bray, and the courtyard grows more crowded. Servants guide wagons, tally goods, and ensure that market exchanges proceed smoothly. You note the precise choreography of trade. Even minor delays can disrupt the rhythm of the castle, revealing how every layer of activity from beds to battlements is interconnected. Mainstream historical fact: castles were administrative hubs as much as defensive structures. Lords collected taxes, regulated trade, and managed estates. Courtiers, clerks, and servants ensured that the machinery of governance functioned seamlessly. The fortress was not merely a residence. It was an engine of order, economy, and control. Quirky tidbit: some merchants brought exotic items, days, spices, or even live birds as novelty gifts or tribute. Reports suggest that on rare occasions, an escaped parrot became a minor celebrity in the courtyard, mimicking commands, startling guards, and generally causing gentle chaos. As the morning progresses, toward noon, the pace slows slightly. Dust settles, meals are served, and the sun climbs high enough to warm stone walls and courtyards. You take a moment to observe the quiet interludes between the chores, the gentle laughter of children, the soft hiss of water in basins, the subtle creak of wooden doors. Even in its busiest moments, the castle breathes in cycles of intensity and calm. The bell tolls once more, signaling midday prayers. Clerks put down quills, cooks pause, and guards momentarily straighten. You notice how seamlessly the household shifts, like an invisible conductor guiding an orchestra. The rhythm of the castlelet's maintenance, its ceremony, its preparation continues in an unbroken chain, a symphony of quiet work. At this moment, you realize that the real story of the castle's morning is not the arrival of nobility or the clang of swords, but the accumulation of small, precise, unseen acts. Every sweep of a broom, every brushed horse, every quill stroke, every combed hair, every managed ledger is a note in a melody of survival and order. Without these quiet contributions, the castle could not function. It would crumble into chaos beneath the weight of its own grandeur. And as you take a final step back to observe the courtyard, you feel the pulse of the day itself. The castle is alive, a living organism of stone, timber, and human effort. You've seen the kitchens, the hall, the chambers, the chapel, the training yard, and the administrative hub. Every layer has its rhythm, every motion a purpose. Every act, no matter how small, essential to the performance of power and life within these walls. Soon, the midday sun will reach its peak. And though the tasks of the day continue, a softer rhythm begins, a prelude to rest, reflection, and the gradual slowing that the evening will demand. But for now, the morning has been fully realized, a testament to the quiet labor and meticulous orchestration that makes a castle more than stone, more than timber, more than a fortress. It makes it a home, a command center, and a living symbol of human endeavor. The sunlight softens as it drifts across the castle walls, warming the stones that have seen centuries of footsteps. The bustle of the morning recedes, replaced by gentler sounds, the distant clink of a gate latch, the soft coo of pigeons in the tower, the murmur of servants exchanging quiet words. You pause, inhaling the mingled scents of herbs, warmed wood, and faint smoke. The castle exhales slowly, its heartbeat easing after the precision of labor and ceremony. You remember the hall swept clean, the beds made, the hair combed, the swords practiced. The records arranged, all the small invisible tasks that allowed the fortress to function. Each act, though unseen by most, has shaped the day, creating order from potential chaos. The castle doesn't simply exist. It thrives because of careful attention, human effort, and the subtle choreography of countless hands moving together. As you wander through sunlit corridors, the shadows stretch longer, softening the edges of stone and timber. The warmth touches your skin, a gentle reminder that the day has passed from its brisk, demanding morning into a quieter, reflective pace. Sounds fade into murmurs. Footsteps slow, and the great doors close with a final, reassuring thud. You can almost feel the stones relaxing, the hearths quieting, the lords and ladies settling into their routine of repose. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the castle as a living organism, each room a pulse, each corridor a vein, each servant, knight, and chambermaid, a cell contributing to the whole. Imagine the soft rustle of rushes underfoot, the gleam of polished tables, the sway of banners, the hush of prayers, and the echo of marching boots fading into memory. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The quiet work of the castle morning remains, invisible yet essential, a testament to endurance, order, and the subtle power of preparation. You've seen its rhythm, felt its pulse, and can carry its calm with you as the day fades into night.